All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Okay. Tonight we have one land use item to be heard. Staff will introduce the item followed by a staff presentation. The applicant will then make their presentation. After the applicant's presentation, the public hearing will open, and if you signed up to speak, you may do so at that time. Okay. Ann Bess Johnson, Berthoud's Community Development Director, will now introduce the first item on the public hearing agenda.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Planning Commission. So tonight, we are going to hear a request for preliminary plat for a seventh filing in an existing subdivision. The location is west of North Berthoud Parkway. It is south of Water Avenue. It is north of Lakeview Avenue, and it is also north of Bunyan Avenue. So as you introduce the process this evening, for those in the audience that might not be familiar with how the land use planning process works, the first stage is that pre-application stage where staff and the applicant work together, discussing water, sewer, all of the other impacts that may be brought upon the town or the neighborhood for that development. The next step then is the application submittal, where we review the application for completeness. It goes out to referral agencies such as the fire, the school district, other districts, other special review agencies, and they take a look at the application. They provide us with comments, and then we provide those comments back to the applicant, and then the applicant stays in that review period until all of the concerns are addressed. And then at that moment in time, then the application is ready to go to a hearing. And that's where we are tonight. This is a public hearing. As you mentioned, Chair Anderson, staff will make their presentation. The applicant will make a presentation. The public hearing then will be opened and closed, and then you all will have discussion and an opportunity to ask clarifying questions either of staff or the applicant, and then you will make a vote. Your vote on the preliminary plat then will be sent to the Town Board of Trustees. When this application, if you approve it and if the Town Board of Trustees approve it, it will come back to you all as a final decision on the final plat. It does not go to the Town Board of Trustees for a final plat. And then tonight, again, we went through this staff presentation, the applicant's presentation, public hearing, and discussion and voting. So with this, I'm going to have Will Charles from Baseline Engineering come on up. Will is our he's our on-call consulting planner, and he has been processing a lot of applications for us, and he's going to talk about some of the details of this particular application. Before I sit down, do you have any questions about the process for me?
Any questions, commissioners? Okay. Thank you.
Alrighty, good evening. Ann's covered a lot of what is on this slide, but it's a kind of infill portion of an existing neighborhood for Vantage. So it's about 8.3 acres. We'll go ahead and jump into it. So for the preliminary plat, this is kind of the northern portion of this infill development. So you can kind of see the area with the dark black line. Anything inside that's this new development. Anything outside of it are those currently in different stages of development, other portions of the Vantage in those earlier filings. And then similar on this also, anything inside that dark black line being the new development, anything outside of it being the already approved portions. Getting into your zoning map, so you can see this portion is zoned that R3, whereas all of the other kind of portions surrounding it are that R1. So this just allows for a slightly higher level of density, about 20 units per acre, is what's permitted in that R3 zone district. Getting into your future land use map, there is is a discrepancy on this portion between this and the zoning map, and I'll get into that in a bit, where it shows this kind of parks, recreation, trail use on that future land use map. So getting into the criteria that preliminary plats are reviewed based on. So the first one is a functional system of lands consistent with the criteria in the code. So staff does find that it meets the criteria of the code. It meets, setbacks, density requirements, all those fun requirements. The second one being it follows the approved concept plan. So that first picture that was shown, where it kind of showed the details of the homes and the duplexes being proposed, is from that neighborhood master plan, and this is substantially similar to what was proposed. The next one being that conforms to the zone district map, prefer land use map and comprehensive plan and port plan. So going back to that discrepancy on those two, that was discussed in depth during the neighborhood master plan phase, and it was determined that with the zoning map being approved, or that zoning classification being approved back in 2016, future land use map being approved in 2021, it kind of takes precedence that what was idealized for this area was that R3. And then also you can kind of see once the applicant gets into their presentation how they've incorporated a lot of open space and through these rear loaded alleys and things like that to kind of meet in a good healthy middle on that, and also meets the idea that was kind of presented during the neighborhood master plan phase. So that's that one, the number 3. Number 4 is utility transportation design is adequate. So the utility plans were provided to you in your packet, as well as this section, since it is an infill, mostly is all connecting to existing roadways throughout the Vantage subdivision. Both those were reviewed by town staff and outside referral agencies, and any comments were addressed, and those were recommended for approval tonight. The next one being that negative impact on adjacent land uses. This is, again, I'll say infill a lot tonight, and that's because it's an infill lot, and a lot of the things around it were planned with this in mind. So it doesn't have any negative impacts on those additional outside land uses. The next one is that need or desirability within the community. So this one, as mentioned, is a little bit different with that R3 zoning compared to that R1. So it offers a different kind of type of housing in this area. So there is that desirability for it, as well as it meeting what the intent of that R3 zone district is. And then the last one is, has the applicant addressed any comments from the public, which through the initial mailing whenever the project was originally submitted, as well as the one to notice this meeting, we didn't receive any public comments, but if there's any members of the public in the audience tonight, the applicant can address those. And then getting into the last of it, the findings recommendations. So staff is recommending or is recommending a motion to recommend approval of the preliminary plat to the Board of Trustees. And I can answer any questions you might have.
Commissioners, any questions of staff? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and load up the applicant's presentation form.
Thank you. At this point, we welcome the applicant to make their presentation. Please state your name and address, please.
Hi, I'm Kristen Turner with TD Group, 444 Mountain Avenue in Berthoud. It's good to see you guys again and to be back here with the preliminary plat for Vantage. So I don't think anyone was here way back when we took the overall Vantage forward, but I think I recognize everybody from when we were here for neighborhood master plan, so that's great. I'll be very brief tonight. As you can see on the screen right now, we just have kind of the location, and I think everybody's familiar with the project. The parcel that we're talking about is right in the middle. So surrounded by all the single family detached. And here is the plan, and this is the only slide that I'll have for you tonight, but I'll tell you, I'll tell you a little bit about kind of the key, some of the key features. So as mentioned, it's only 8.31 acres. We are proposing 60 lots. These are single-family attached lots or duplexes, whatever you prefer to call them. We have had existing R3 zoning on this property now for many years. I won't try to do the math, but way back when. This portion of the property is designed as a rear-loaded product, which means that everything is alley-loaded. And what this is going to do is it's just going to create streetscapes that we love to see, right? So we've got front doors facing the street, sidewalks, front porches, those type of things. There are no curb cuts interrupting the streetscape, so really nice for pedestrians and anybody that's moving through this section of the development. Everybody accesses their unit from their garages from the back, and so you don't see cars parked in the driveway out front. Those are parked in the back or parked in the extra parking lot area. So we love the streetscapes that we're able to create when we're using a rear-loaded product, which will be a nice addition to this neighborhood. In addition, I wanted to point out the open space. So open space and pedestrian connectivity have always been really big components of the Vantage development since day one when we were working on Vantage First filing. And this is an infill area, so it's just a little area that was planned for slightly higher density development surrounded by single-family detached. But what you will see, let's see, is there a way to get that cool little red?
Your guess is as good as mine.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Now I know where it is in the future. Thank you. All right. So right here, next to the single-family detached, we always had a large green belt that was proposed. We have mirrored that on this tract as well. So you see we are maintaining some additional open space on this side. And we are providing a trail connection, which connects to the rest of the subdivision from the south. It runs all the way around along the western edge of this tract. And up to the northern portion, it'll cross the street and connect with the park that's planned for across the street. That does continue all the way to the north end of this property as well. So just making sure that even this small tract is tying in this piece of property to the rest of the pedestrian connections that are already set up as part of Vantage 1 through 6. We're up to now. So you'll also notice that we included some almost like little mini park areas. These buildings in the center front on these green spaces. So it gives the residents there, a nice front door. It gives them a place to spill out and have some open space of their own. And it also just kind of starts to create those open space fingers that snake from the west through to the east. So just adding some space that feels usable and enhanced and not just trying to fill with lots. And then you see we're also providing our detention down in the southwest corner, which will remain open as well. And we do have all the traditional tree lawns and street trees that will circle this site as well. So again, an important factor for this was just kind of how we were connecting to the rest of the community, making sure that we got that trail system in, even when it's a small little piece. And the other piece that I wanted to point out was this, these R3 tracks, these were our opportunities to provide a product type other than single-family detached. We know in Berthoud and kind of all over the place right now, there is this extreme need for additional housing product types. And so this is just going to add some much needed diversity to the neighborhood. It's going to provide a different product type, a different price point. And again, anytime we can have a neighborhood that includes those different product types so that we have different housing for folks at different stages in their life cycle, we love to be able to see that rather than just a development that has only one type of housing available. So that is really the gist of this presentation. If you were to look at the neighborhood master plan, you will see that this plan looks exactly the same. We have not made any changes, so it is in conformance with the neighborhood master plan and everything that we've presented to you in the past. And at that, I'm happy to answer questions.
Questions of the applicant?
I just have one quick one, which is the ovals of open space here. So you said these won't be detention areas, so will they be maintained by
actually had a question too. Just out of for I guess for perspective or scale, what's the bottom one, the biggest one? Like, what's its width from the not the length, but the shorter distance? Do you know?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I would guess 50 feet across, maybe? Does that sound roughly?
I was gonna guess maybe 80.
Okay. I'm looking at the buildings and kind of guesstimating off the size of those,
Yeah,
so,
either
but they're
would sound
pretty
u-
well spaced.
Yeah, either of it sound usable.
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
You mentioned the detention area. Will that be accessible to residents?
Well, it'll be, yes, all detention areas are accessible. It's gonna be native seed and we're not planning a trail through it. So it's not necessarily what you wanna walk through without a trail, but yeah, detention areas are always available and I know I've gone and walked with my dogs through drainage areas before, even when there aren't trails, so.
Just thinking about children wandering in there and that kind of thing. Because there's a lot of, and I know there's a lot of parking in front of it.
Yes, we have put visitor and guest parking in front of it. Yeah. And it's right on the corner, so there would be eyes on it. You know, it's not tucked away.
Any other questions, commissioners? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. With that, I'd like to open the public hearing for members of the public who would like to speak. Please, if you do want to speak, come to the podium and state your name and address. Public hearing is open.
My name is Lynn Larson. I live at 205 Hubble Street in Berthoud. I'm a member of the Berthoud Tree Advisory Committee. BTAC and the Town Forestry Department have lots of concerns about what's going on with trees throughout the town. We have one development, which we won't mention, where the trees have mostly all died because of improper planting, improper watering, improper care all the way through. There's been, like I say, a lack of watering. Sometimes they've been planted in the wrong season of the year. They've been planted at stressful times of the year for the trees. I know that the town forester did have one problem with the contractor for Vantage in one other area of Vantage at one time. And so I would like the applicant to please fill us in on the following. What season of the year do they plan to plant their tree lawn? When in the year? How will they ensure that their subcontractors who are doing all this planting will follow our proper planting procedures and consult with the forestry department, get the proper inspections and so forth? And then how are they going to ensure proper watering and care, especially informing the future property owners that they are responsible for our town trees that are adjacent to their property or on their property? And so those are the three things: planting season, ensuring that the subcontractors follow proper procedures in conjunction with our forestry department, and informing the residents of their own responsibilities from the time of planting on forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public like to speak at this time? Okay, with that, I'll close the public hearing. I'd like to ask the applicant if she could please come up and answer the three questions we just heard. Yes, I can ask those to you in the form of a question. First of all, which season will the tree lawn initially be planted? How will we ensure that the subs that make these plantings follow proper procedures in consultation with the forestry department? And what types of disclosure or training will be given to homeowners with regard to proper water and care of those that are adjacent to their property?
So we defer typically to the landscaping contractor that is selected to do all of the installation. We do all of our planting installations during proper seasons for such. If it does start to get to where it's colder months, or like this year where it's been colder longer than it usually is, we do hold off on those plantings. We're happy to work with the forestry department to ensure that those timelines, if they do have specifications, that we are following those. There is a warranty on all of the plantings, so if there are materials that don't make it through, they are required to be replaced at the installer's cost.
How long is that warranty?
It's typically a year and sometimes it's 2. I'd have to double check what it is set for this project.
And is there some type of information that's provided to homeowners with regard to proper care of this tree lawn? Particularly those that are adjacent to it, and is anything provided to them so that there's some long-term, or like a plan for long-term care of these plantings?
So most of these tree lawns are actually off of the lots, so they would be maintained by the district. So they do have that information. And it helps with making sure that it is taken care of better because it's more consistent.
Any other questions, commissioners? Oh, we have the applicant here. Go ahead.
Does the town decide the species of the tree?
No, so as part of the process, when we submit plans, we select species of tree. There are criteria for that, so there are lists of trees that are permitted and lists of trees that are prohibited. There are specified numbers that you can do in a row, so you can do 3 in a row and you have to do 3 different trees on the other side of the street. So we follow the code in terms of the design, but we propose the trees. When we submit our plans, they're sent out for referrals to all of the various agencies, which does include the forestry department. So the town's forester has an opportunity to comment, and sometimes they'll ask us to remove a tree, and switch it with a different species, or provide more diversity in the species that we're showing on the plans, whatever it may be. And so as part of our revision, resubmittal process back and forth with the town, we incorporate any of those comments that we receive from the forester.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you. Any other questions?
No questions, but I appreciate the initial question.
Thanks. Thank you, Lynn.
Mhm.
Thanks for that. Okay. Yeah, I think we are at our discussion phase here with regard to this project. Any comments? You want to start with a comment?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall it's a really nice layout. I know Vantage is kind of well known for its connectivity, so that they've done a good job of linking all that up. And yeah, I couldn't agree more that this type of housing product is needed and worth it and all up and down the Front Range. So great that we're getting more of it here. But I don't really see any, in terms of the criteria for preliminary plat, I don't have any points of discussion. So.
Thank you.
Yep, I agree. Thank you.
I'll do one follow-up on that, and it's maybe out of scope, but I can speak from personal experience. So, having a duplex helps economically from the value of the home, and we really need that. But every time they're part of a metro district, they can pay almost as much to the metro district that they are to your property tax. And so there's this kind of dark cloud sometimes, if you will, hanging out there. We look at these opportunities to create some value homes and some lower income homes, and then they get that layered on top of it. How we address that, I'm not sure. Perhaps it's totally out of scope for us. But I feel it's worth mentioning because it does have a kind of a significant impact on the cost that the property owner is paying.
I think that a valid point, especially proportionately, if you were to look at somebody's monthly statement and what it would come out to be. I guess I would ask Director Johnson, I haven't had a chance to read through the recently adopted Metro District policy, but I don't know if that was specifically addressed in terms of if mills are different based off of single family versus multifamily and all that kind of stuff.
And then I don't want to screw up the direction, but obviously we have a illustration of a pool and a park. And while those things are wonderful, they can be extremely expensive to maintain. Once that becomes then part of the metro district, and it ends up falling as a cost on the property owner. So just to, they look wonderful and it is wonderful, but essentially forever going forward, there's a cost associated with that. And the question would become, as a property owner, what does that look like? And would I rather not have that and be able to afford the home as opposed to the opposite, so.
Yep, so I know that every metro district, how they're established, they utilize their maximum ability to tax in different ways. So some metro districts don't go to that max and some do. You're right that the town trustees just did entertain a change to the metro district policy, and it's a lot more strict for new metro districts moving forward, that they have to prove a benefit or an impact to the community as well as the development that they are planning on constructing. But as far as this particular metro district and the amount of levies that will be assessed or taxes that will be assessed on these particular property owners, I would like the applicant to come up and if they have any information that they can provide to us regarding that. It is a little bit off of it's not in our criteria for approval, but if you want to understand the affordability factor, I think they can definitely come up and explain that.
And is this Berthoud Metropolitan, I think, right? Okay, just making sure I got it.
Would you like an opportunity to address that?
So we are not in control of the Metro District for this development. That is another group, and I do believe that the majority of that board is residents living within the Berthoud Heritage Metro District. I don't know, I'm so sorry, I'm not prepared for what the mill levy is for the area offhand, but this will be a lower price point for homes, which will keep that property tax lower based on the percentage that it all falls under.
Do you know what the number of this metro district is by any chance?
I believe this is District 5 and District 10.
And is that part of the Berthoud?
Berthoud Heritage, yes,
So it's part of the 17 other ones.
correct.
And while you may be correct that the residents may be the majority on this one, the actual voting, it takes all the metro districts into account. And the developers are on the boards of like 13 or 14, and they control the overall vote. So it's very complex.
Correct, it is. We're not part of the developers that are on that board, but we're not, no. Yeah, unfortunately, D.R. Horton Melody Homes does not have a seat on any of those boards.
Thank you for that. We appreciate your
Thank you.
attempting to address that. And well, I think we all have a concern about affordability, particularly as things are changing in Berthoud. Unfortunately, we don't have control over this. The town council has more control of this with their policies and that kind of thing. I'm not sure how we could, unless you have a suggestion, I'm not sure how we could impact that at this point.
Yeah, I think, I agree. I don't think there's much to say except, I guess, document the concern, which is valid. But yeah, and it's even with the new policy, as Director Johnson pointed out, this one is probably I believe the governing document is called a service plan, and that's been in place for quite some time. And so whatever was established is kind of there, right? Yeah.
And believe me, I have similar sentiments to you. Having lived in an area that had a metro district that just made it incredibly unaffordable for many people.
The other thing is there's a large percentage, and again, here on Lakes, the number I was told is north of 35% of the property owners are out of state. The majority of states, my understanding is the United States do not have metro districts. So someone comes in, they buy a home, and about 2 years later is when they get the shock and awe.
I'm one of them, so I hear what you're saying. That happened to us too. So it's not my favorite topic, but again, I think looking at our responsibility here and trying to determine what we can do, I'm not sure there's anything that we can do about that at this point, other than as a citizen board, we obviously have certain opinions about things so it could be noted. So with that, do we have any other things that we want to discuss about this particular development and plat, preliminary plat?
I do not.
How in the scope of a large phase where everything's, it looks like zone one, does a zone three, does that go back to historically that happened, or is there a percentage that's higher density? Cause I think all around this is single family, isn't it? Is that correct?
There's single family around it. So when they did the neighborhood master plan, they delineated which areas on that overall neighborhood would be for different types of housing products. And so it's like putting the puzzle together, where this is the higher density neighborhood area, the R3. And so when they had that neighborhood master plan, they conceptualized what different types of housing products they could conceive in those areas.
And I think it's consistent with Berthoud's attempts to try to have a good blend of different types of products so that, and I think this is a piece of, and shows that type of commitment. Okay, well, if we don't have any more discussion, I would entertain a motion with regard to this land use.
I would make a motion. I move to forward a motion of approval of the preliminary plat for the Vantage Development, 7th filing to the Town Board of Trustees due to the findings in the staff report, including compliance with the land use code, criteria for approval found in section 30-6-107B, and the comprehensive plan to the town trustees for consideration subject to the conditions of approval found in the staff report.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Great. With a second, then I would ask Ms. Tover to call the roll.
Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kurtz,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith. Yes. Commissioner Wing,
Yes.
Commissioner Feltley.
With that, the yeses have it, and that the preliminary plat motion is approved. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So let's go to our next item on the agenda, and that would be our work session with staff over our comprehensive plan. And you're on again.
Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you very much. You're encouraging.
So tonight, I really just wanted to go over the framework of the comprehensive plan. And in the state of Colorado, by statute, Planning Commission for communities and counties own the comprehensive plan process. So this is something that this is really your big moment, is guiding that comprehensive plan process, working with staff, working with the consultants, because it is the vision. This is when you get to be strategic planners and you get to help with the vision of the future of Berthoud. The Berthoud Comprehensive Plan was updated in 2021. So the next time we do a minor adjustment, in Colorado, you can do a minor adjustment in 5 years. So it'd be 2026, and that could be if there is something changed, drastically changed, you would want to update that. If you, let's say, I can't even think of, some demographics and the socioeconomic portions of the master plan could be updated as well as population projections. And then you usually do a major overhaul on your comprehensive plan every 10 years. So the next time Berthoud may want to consider that for adoption would be in 2031, but you'd want to start working on that about 2 years ahead because it does take quite a bit of time with a lot of citizen input. So again, the authority is the Planning Commission makes, amends, and carries out the comprehensive or the strategic plan. So in a lot of the motions and a lot of the packet materials, you're always going to get something on how does this adhere to that comprehensive plan. And again, that's the vision document, the guiding document for the town of Berthoud and how the citizens, you all, and the town trustees view the future growth of Berthoud. And again, that's the whole purpose of a comprehensive plan, is to really guide the future development and future growth of Berthoud. So again, the scope, it's all about community engagement. And many communities updated their comprehensive plans in the time of COVID. And so getting that community engagement was difficult. I've read through the comprehensive plan and there is a nice section on how they got the engagement. They had some in-person meetings. I believe there were some surveys. I didn't participate in that, but I really applaud the efforts that were made. It was a very difficult time. I was updating at the same time in another community, I was updating the comprehensive plan as well as the Trails and Transportation Master Plan. And it was a challenge to get people to participate. So good job to Berthoud for doing that. Again, the objectives, so these are straight from the comprehensive plan. The objectives are to make sure that the vision is reflective of the values in Berthoud. Overhaul policy foundation, so that's the land use code. That might be another special study, like the First Avenue Overlay District, to maintain Berthoud's small town character, to incorporate new urbanist principles, transect development and character districts versus traditional zoning pattern, and we're gonna get to that in another slide. To be used for work planning and budgeting. So there's an action plan section of the comprehensive plan that will talk about, updating the code this way or having wayfinding signage. So those action items, then staff can utilize those to forecast our budget needs for a year if we're wanting to accomplish those action items. And then to structure the plan for easy navigation, implementation, and accountability. I did not go back and look at the 2014 plan, but there's just reference that it was not easy to navigate, but.
Is there, I thought, when I read the plan, I was incredibly impressed with it. And I just wonder, is there somebody in the town who bears the responsibility of having brought this to fruition? I know the consultants were used, but was there a driving force behind this, or was it collaborative with the trustees or with the planning commission? I'm just curious. Someone deserves some pretty big kudos, I believe, for the way this was done.
Well, and the town of Berthoud did receive an award at the American Planning Association Colorado chapter last year for the comprehensive plan. It is the best comp plan in the state. They got that award last year. So Kurt Fries, the former community development director, Adam, all of a sudden I'm blanking on his last name. Yes, Adam Olinger. They were the staff liaisons working with the consultants, and then of course Chris Kirk, the town administrator, other staff were actively involved in guiding that process too. So kudos to them for having a good plan, and it really truly is a very good comprehensive plan. Then the organization. So tonight I don't really want to talk a lot about the details of the comprehensive plan, maybe just an overview of what's there. It is in your e-notebooks. So you can get in and take a look at that. And if there's something that you ever want to have a deep dive into, we can definitely do that. Again, there's the introduction, there's an influence section, the direction, and then the implementation, as well as appendix materials. So, do not ask me details about this because I am not an expert. I am just glad that Berthoud did not do form-based codes because I've been a planner for almost 30 years and I don't even understand what those are. So, the Euclidean zoning is that traditional zoning of, industrial 1, industrial 2, commercial 1, 2, and 3, residential 1, 2, 3, whatever. But the way Berthoud is wanting to go in the future is have 3 overlaying place types. And those place types evoke a certain feeling. So in Berthoud, there's a conservation district, and that is meant to preserve significant environmental space. There is urban residential and commercial, as well as suburban residential and commercial. And the difference between the two is density. So those are the place types the town is wanting to go towards more. And we'll take a look at a few of those. But again, the transect approach was first to establish those place types. Then within those place types to establish different characters, and then to come up with concepts on how those place types would be enrolled. And in Berthoud, the place types are natural areas, rural, suburban, general urban, urban centers, and special districts. And one of those special districts is the First Avenue corridor, which is Berthoud's new innovation district. And that's also in your e-notebook. And the Mountain Avenue corridor, that's in the land use code. And then New Berthoud, which is out east at I-25. So it really, it's talking more about not necessarily uses or Euclidean zoning really was strongly use-based, but instead this is more feeling and how is it going to look and how is it going to function, which is very great and it's a very progressive way of thinking about your community. So key outcomes of the engagement process then. There are lots of indicators that are in a lot of details that are in the comprehensive plan and results of what the public had to say. Key outcomes, there were improvements have been made. There are new businesses and restaurants. The appearance of downtown was improved. There are improved parks and recreation opportunities. The negatives were growth, traffic, people, and development. And then another key outcome was that the town is working at balancing that growth. So you see that Berthoud is kind of in a community that you could equate to, you know, the teenage years. It's like growth is here, it's coming, but we don't know if we like it yet. We don't know if we're willing to take that, you know, that risk, and it's balancing all of those items. So again, the key outcomes of the engagement were making desired improvements to the community, environmental and sustainability programs, transportation enhancement, economic development, and addressing the needs of housing. So on this slide, you're not going to be able to read anything here, but this is a page from the master plan. And again, it's talking about those place types, the natural, rural, suburban, urban center, and special districts. And it talks about those feelings and what is the town of Berthoud trying to envision or envisioning for the future of those areas. And then you can see on the right-hand side of the slide, we're just, you know, what are those special places to make for people. And on this one again, there's the demographic profile. It talks about housing units. Berthoud really is set up very nicely in the zoning code, and a lot of it is an outcome of the vision in the comprehensive plan to have neighborhoods where you can have paired homes across the street from single-family detached homes. And it's a very unique concept, and not a lot of communities do that, especially communities of Berthoud size. Berthoud also has a lot of housing types that are in the $350,000 to $600,000 range, which seems like a lot, but it is that missing middle for attainable housing. And attainable housing meets individuals that are making between 80 and 120% of the area median income. That's what they can afford. And a lot of communities are missing that. You'll oftentimes hear a term called the missing middle. Is where can the individuals that are, you know, in that middle area afford to live, as well as Berthoud does have some housing, not as robust stock as other communities. Has a lot of housing that then is under that 80% AMI. But there are ways that individuals are living in Berthoud, whether it be apartments or some kind of rentals. And then Berthoud does have a lot of homes in the, you know, in the over $750,000 range too. But a good chunk of Berthoud's housing stock is in that missing middle. So lots of good demographics. And then again, plan direction. This is a great section that really talks about, again, that vision. What were the individuals that participated in this master plan? What were they most interested in seeing? So you're gonna see the vision and then goals and then strategies. And then one of the last few pages of the master plan, it does list and it categorizes them by different types of activities. I've gone in because I noticed there were several that were overlapping. I went in and I further dwindled that down into community development, economic development, parks, recreation, and amenities, and then infrastructure. And so once we are fully staffed, we're going to start talking about then how do we implement and work with others within Berthoud to implement some of those goals. And some of the goals have been implemented. Chris Kirk, the town administrator, has taken a lot of the emergent needs and has pushed those forward, such as the First Avenue Corridor Plan. We have a new landscape design guidelines that can be used as a handbook for citizens and to help guide the landscaping of new development. And the water and wastewater master plan, that's Ken Matthews is heading that up. And so a lot of the goals are already either accomplished or in process due to the individuals that were before and Chris's guidance. And so we'll just continue picking some of those emergent needs and budgeting for them and getting them accomplished. So at that point in time, this really wraps up my intended presentation, was just give that good overview and then encourage you all to look into that master plan or comprehensive plan as well. I can read a little bit about me is I can read things several times and I don't retain anything unless I'm implementing it. So doing this slideshow really helped me get into that comprehensive plan again and revisit it. So I might not remember everything, but I know where I can go to find the information.
So I have a question. What if you, so you can only update it every 10 years, what if you run out of goals? What if you become?
I know, right? Like we're gonna do them all next year, right? We're overachievers.
Part of my question along that line is how are we progressing, like over this timeline? Did we knock it all out in 2 years? You know?
No, it's not all finished, and that's a great question. And it's one thing that I would really like to see is a comp plan dashboard on the website to show here are all of the different categories of what we're wanting to accomplish, and here's what the town is accomplishing. Because you're right, what if in 5 years we accomplish all of the infrastructure goals? So that would be a perfect time, and it doesn't have to be at 5 years or 10 years. Maybe Berthoud decides, hey, we've accomplished everything and we need to update in 7 years. We can update in 7 years. It's just every 10 years you have to update.
Oh, you have to?
Yeah, you
Okay,
have
I
to
see.
update. Yeah, and a lot of communities will choose that midpoint, that 5 years, and kind of scrub things up. But you're exactly right. If we accomplish everything, we're overachievers, which is great, but then we definitely need to go back to the drawing board. And so that's why I like the idea of a dashboard, because even if we get to 50% and we know the other things are planned, well, we do need to go back to the community and say, all right, we heard you, we've accomplished, now where do we need to go?
Could that also be looked at as, I guess, all of that plays into the growth. So could that be a negative thing where we had this plan over 10 years and we pumped it all into 3? I mean, because what's next, right? The next would be more growth, more development, I mean, that's always what's next. So there's like a fine balance where do you not want to be overachievers, I guess? You want to use your time horizon.
Right, I mean, utilize you're very reflective on that, because utilizing your time horizon is a smart thing to do, because a community can change over those 10 years too. Plus, I mean, I'm joking about being about the town, overachieving. There are action items in the comprehensive plan that you cannot do in a year. They are going to need that long-term vision to move forward. One thing is wayfinding signage. That might sound really simple, but it's, all right, what do people need to find? What does this look like? How are we going to get other people to buy into it? It's a downtown thing, it's a community-wide thing. We have to make sure we're being reflective of the vision and values and the materials, the placement, the maintenance. So even a simple thing like you'd think wayfinding sign is a piece of cake. There's so much thought that goes into it and behind the scenes, that it isn't just a simple fix.
Well, and some of it has to do with revenues, anticipated, as well as actual, and some of the things like the water resources and infrastructure plan it will have to span many years. So some of it, I think, would be impossible to implement and be finished with in that 10-year period.
Yep. And in 5 years, the town may decide, well, we had these 8 goals, they're no longer important to the town. So, or these 3 goals we're seeing as emergent, but they're really not. So it really gives an annual when we're preparing for a budget and we're preparing for the work plan for the next year, it gives a nice time to reflect. And what are we doing? How are we moving forward? Are we adhering to the vision of Planning Commission, the town trustees, and the residents of Berthoud? And how do we stay true to that vision?
It seems like the I-25 corridor, we're significant laggers in that. And I don't know if it's the whole Bill Gates thing I've heard about, but if you just go a little bit farther north, it's like Brooklyn, New York with the projects. There are massive, massive, massive multifamily units there. And again, I don't know where that falls in the master plan, but it seems like that's just a absolute gold mine waiting to happen.
Is that the Centera? Is that 34?
Well, even if you go a little farther north than that, I mean, there's these honestly, I just came from New York and New Jersey, and it is just massive multifamily building after another. It's something you don't expect to see.
I normally take 287. So
you don't expect to see it in, northern Colorado, but I mean, that whole area, Greeley's a massive town now. It's just everything. But anyhow, it looks like you talk about, overachievers. I think we have decades of growth left before we hit any kind of problem with, being overbuilt. And I'm not talking about turning our nice little town into a metropolis, but, whoever had the foresight to really take our town out that far, I just think that's going to really, and that can almost be, it's like Loveland. I mean, I remember Loveland in the 70s. It didn't go to I-25. It didn't look like that. It was a little tiny Loveland. So now they still have a really nice little Loveland, and then they got
Centera.
the Denver suburb out there. Yeah.
Well, and what's nice about slower growth, and Berthoud for a while did have a growth moratorium. What's nice about now growing again is we have insightful staff that led the comprehensive plan process and have updated the code so that we can have very respectful, meaningful style of growth. And it scares me every day when I think, okay, we've got this new application in, how are we going to make sure that it meets the high standards that are established in this master plan and the landscape plan and the First Avenue corridor plan and our land use code? And it's just making sure that everybody's being held to that same standard. So we have a little bit of luxury in delayed growth, and we have a little bit of luxury in maybe not being in that big mix. It's coming. But we have I'd much rather have luxury of time to do it right
Agreed.
than have to be reactionary.
Kind of the history of Berthoud, like you said, there used to be a growth cap, and essentially, from what I understand, a decade or so was not, I don't want to say lost, but not a lot of development happened for a decade or so. And I'm not saying that that was a good decision, but in hindsight, because all these kind of more progressive planning methodologies and approaches have been developed since then, became a little bit of a blessing, because now that, well, one, as of like yesterday, you're no longer allowed to have a growth cap in Colorado. I don't know if anybody saw that.
Really?
Yeah, Governor Polis signed.
Hasn't Boulder had that for like since the fifties?
I think the three communities that I know that had it were Boulder, Golden, and Wheat Ridge. And so Governor Polis signed into law that you can no longer have a growth cap. But because we have this great plan, is that growth is somewhat organic and is hard to stop, right? Because it's a lot of private transactions and land's changing hands, and if somebody wants to sell what used to be agricultural and develop it, because that's kind of their retirement funds and stuff, like no one can really stop them. But when that does happen, I think stuff like this is great, because especially this particular plan, because it's done in the right way or in the best way possible with a comprehensive vision. So
I think water is gonna be a natural governor, though. It sounds like, sounds like that's, talking to some developers recently, I see all these big lots for sale. Yeah, there's no water, you can't do anything with them once you buy them.
And I can appreciate the town council's work session last week on that. It was very interesting to see how they're trying to plan for this, and you look at what the resources that are gonna be for that, how that's gonna impact costs in the future, impact fees, that kind of thing. So I think we're on top of it. We're trying to be on top of it,
That's great.
you know?
Did anyone here actually fill out the survey for the comp plan?
I did not.
When it was originally done?
No,
Yeah.
and when they updated in 2021, the community survey.
I filled out part of
Isn't that
it. There was like a visioning part where you were supposed to like select pictures that you associated with Berthoud. I did that. I don't know if anyone else remembers this from
The
that,
survey
but-
was the longest survey I've ever. I'm not kidding. An hour in, I had to.
And you stuck with it for an hour? I'd be
Well-
like 4 minutes, I gotta go.
That's
Your
kind of
point.
what I would say, and like I was dedicated.
Wow.
But that was I did take it, and I attended multiple sessions where the town board was working on it, and the staff, absolutely amazing job, and then the trustees and the input they had, it made me feel really good about the community I was a part in, to see how much everybody cared. And I just remember thinking, man, I guarantee hardly anybody made it through that survey. But if they did, they would be really happy to know, like
Yeah, I think I
it's-
saw the 557 partial surveys.
Yeah.
I have a
Yeah.
I have a specific question, and it's more about how the process comes to be. So the bike park, right? So and I know this, I can speak to it, and there's a correlation here. When you build a grocery store, you do market studies. You usually do 2 or 3, and they're like phone books. They are so comprehensive, and they go into every single thing. Was something done that, I know I'm not gonna be going over a lot of jumps on a bicycle, but is it gonna be, are 10,000 people a week gonna use? Was all of that work done, or was that just someone's vision? We thought, there was a real need for a bike park, and fantastic piece of land right on the highway, but
So I don't know how the vision of Berthoud's bike park came to be, but I will ask and I will find out, and I will bring that back next time.
and I gotta believe minimum, without the land, just the work that's done, and I've been watching it happen, it's gotta be $500,000.
I think it's north of that.
Well, so did I. I just pulled that number out of the air and I thought it was conservative, but again, if it's, if it ends up, they're making a parking lot there, if it's packed and it's used, gosh, that's great, but if it's used once a week by a couple people,
Yeah.
it
I'm
just-
really amazed at how much the skate parks are used.
Really?
So yeah.
I could
think
be in
that
left
there's-
field, no clue, I'm
Yeah.
dying
I
to see if
agree,
it
cause
gets
I walk
used.
by the one that's on Mountain Avenue all the time and there's always kids in there.
Yeah,
And Wagner, the Wagner Farm skate park's always used.
it's always been.
But I don't know a ton about it, but I was on previously before planning commission on the port committee there's kind of like a similar parallel document to this on the recreation side called Parks and Open Space Plan or whatnot. And so there is a parks master plan and it was decided through that process. So I don't know if it was a survey, but
If it's used, it's great,
but it is intended, I know that they were looking, like there's a similar type and I think size park in Boulder, and I don't even think there is one in Fort Collins or north of here, so I think the expectation was that it wouldn't just be for Berthoud residents, that it would be considered kind of a regional amenity.
And an
But here-
economic development generator as well.
And then exactly, and as folks travel to Berthoud, because maybe there was somebody in Loveland who used to have to go all the way to Boulder, now they go to Berthoud.
it's great.
And then afterwards, they pop into the restaurant or,
Do you know where that dirt bike, motorcycle, dirt bike, like motocross, it's never used now? Do you know what I'm talking about, right on the
Iverson
highway?
Major,
Right,
yeah,
well,
I know.
I drove up there thinking maybe I could use it, but, I saw a for sale sign just went up on that.
I think it's shut down. Somebody told me it was shut
Oh,
down.
no, it hasn't been used for years and years,
Yeah.
which is a shame, but, there's a new for sale sign just went up on that, and is that Berthoud?
That is Berthoud. Right by I-25.
Right on 25,
I believe that's within our growth management area, yeah. I mean, it's a little bit like a little lollipop out there, but I think it is, yeah.
It's in our growth management area. Off the top of my head, I can't tell you if it's annexed or not. But
Could you speak to that just at a high level? So say we've got an adjacent town right next to us and we haven't annexed the land yet. What's the process from someone else like a Longland or Loveland, acquiring that over Berthoud?
right, so there are a couple things, and they could. Berthoud has the future land use map. And we've defined where we think we can grow based on where we can provide urban services such as water, stormwater, sanitary sewer. And so we've defined that as our growth area. When Larimer County gets a development that's in our growth area or near Berthoud, they send us a referral. And we don't have a current intergovernmental agreement with Larimer County, but many of their intergovernmental agreements are very favorable towards the community, where if somebody's coming in, we could have an agreement with Larimer County where they can still develop in the county. However, they would have to develop at our standards. Or Larimer County could tell someone within our growth management area, you have to develop in Berthoud. You can't develop in unincorporated Larimer County. Weld County has intergovernmental agreements as well, but they're not as progressive when it comes to working with communities, like in that type of sense.
We go in both counties, don't we?
Yes, yep. And then as far as we do abut right up to Campion and just south of Loveland. We do go also down towards Longmont. I've not seen an intergovernmental agreement with Longmont or with Loveland independently. But as communities continue to grow, that's something that we may want to consider is having those intergovernmental agreements. Also, it's a nice way to have community separation and community buffers. So let's say Loveland realizes that they're growing a lot to the south. They want a buffer so that it's not just one big sprawling metropolis. We could come up with some ideas to have some buffering between our
Like the
communities.
north side of
Yeah.
Loveland.
I was
Fort
thinking the
Collins.
exact same thing, yeah.
How about the south side
You
of
can't
Fort
even tell the
Collins? Isn't that,
difference.
Yeah.
I mean, massive?
That's what we're
Right.
saying is South Fort Collins and North
Yeah.
Loveland, there's really, you would have to really have a map to know what town you're in at that point.
Yeah, or even Windsor and southeast Fort Collins, it's just, it's those blurred lines, so, through that intergovernmental agreement process, we would have agreements with Loveland saying, we're not gonna grow north of 60, you're not gonna grow south of 60.
Do we have those?
Not with Loveland, and not with Longmont that I'm aware of. We have a very old one with Larimer County, and we have, I think, a really old one with Weld County too. So those are things that I need to start looking at, and just so that we all recognize and respect each other as neighbors. And then we all, right now though, there aren't any wild land grab wars that I'm aware of.
Yeah, and I do know that there is a goal generally for the Berthoud Open Space Plan to, I mean, it won't be a complete circle around the city, but as best as we can control to try to essentially, like you said, have this buffering so that it's not just nonstop development.
With Lebanon almost non-existent, right?
The north side,
287.
north side's way more challenging. The east side out to the highway and is intended to be a protected corridor, and then the south side down the Boulder County line and into Boulder County is intended to be protected. It's not all protected as of today, but that's like, I guess, the vision is that.
Right, and we still have to recognize, and I think you brought it up, it's private property owners' rights. Unless the town is willing to buy a property and dictate how it's going to develop, we in the West, it's very pro private property rights. So it's that balance of recognizing you can develop. However, if you want to develop in Berthoud, we have these development standards, and you have to meet our standards.
But again, driving into Fort Collins, I don't know what the name of that street is, it goes all the way. And it's just, there are thousands and thousands of acres that's just open space.
Yeah, that would be capped, yeah.
And I think there's even some signs up that say kind of what it is, and it will always be that, my understanding from reading some of those signs. And Boulder has obviously done, like between Boulder and Louisville, I think Boulder owns a ton of that land.
Yeah.
And so is that part of the plan, is for us to procure some land to keep some of that buffer?
Berthoud is going to start investigating how to do that. There's a lot of money, there's a lot of, there are organizations such as Colorado Open Lands and American Farmland Trust, the Trust for Public Land. There are lots of opportunities to partner with organizations that would hold a conservation easement. And so land development is like a bundle of sticks. You have blue for water. Here's your water right associated with your property. This is your development right. Here's your mineral rights. And oftentimes those rights are stripped from your property. Oftentimes the mineral rights are severed and might stay with the original property owner. And so you have this property owner here for your subsurface, and then now you have your land and your water rights. And sometimes people have had to sell some of their water rights during a hard time on the farm or the ranch, and then you always will have that land. And sometimes people will do these things called dry up covenants, where they'll completely strip the water from the land, and so then you're left with land. There are lots of other rights, but I only had three prompts.
The big parcels with no water, that means a lot of times somebody had previously liquidated or they had sold their water rights at a previous point in time, and now are looking to sell the land, and it's not as valuable.
I lived in a town called Warwick, New York, and every time they sold a home over a certain price point, they collected additional taxes. Those taxes were taken and used to then turn those farms where they would never be developed. And so there's just all these farms all over and again, they have beautiful signs that said, we did this.
Yeah.
And it's accomplishing the same thing.
It is.
Without an investment on the part of the town, right?
Well, not necessarily, because now you're left with this land. Here's your land rights because your minerals and your water have been severed. And you have this land right. And oftentimes this land is somewhere in a community's long-range vision. And let's say this land was supposed to be high-density residential development, but that individual doesn't want to do that. So there's an inherent development right then that can also be stripped from that property, and you can do things like a transfer of a development right program where you would sell those development rights to somebody else. And that's a whole big conversation we're not gonna get into tonight, because I know the farmer's market is on for another 48 minutes if you wanted to go to the farmer's market. And then, but there are lots of things that you can do, but in the end, and there are tax credits in the state of Colorado for conserving your land, but somebody has to be the holder of that conservation easement. So you strip the development right, and then someone has to hold that easement. It can be a community, but most of the time it's going to be somebody like Trust for Public Land or American Farmland Trust or Colorado Open Lands. So they would hold that easement. Oftentimes it's in perpetuity or 99 years, and you can't develop. So there's lots of different things. Anyway, but Berthoud, we do have a nice, robust future land use map, and it does show a lot of hopeful agriculture land around Berthoud. But again, we have to balance that with private property rights. So we're looking at lots of options. We just don't have anything set in stone yet.
Can I ask just a question about, I guess, how the comp plan factors into economic development? I know planning and economic development are separate, I guess, departments under Berthoud, but is there, obviously we get value out of a comp plan, right? Because we now know how to plan and have a vision, but is it also been used as kind of like a marketing tool in economic development? And have we had success with it, or I mean, maybe not stuff that you can talk about like specifically, but are people like, oh wow, this is great to see that Berthoud has really thought everything through. So
Definitely. So one of the things that when we have pre-application meetings with folks, we always bring up the master plan. We always are talking about the conservation district, the urban and the suburban districts. We're talking about how Berthoud is wanting to maintain small town charm, how Berthoud is wanting to develop in a very concentric, dense pattern and then move out. So the vision, individuals know up front, there's a vision in the master plan, comprehensive plan. It's reflected to some degree in that land use code. There are some things that we need to tighten up, and I'm gonna be working on that. But yes, and it definitely is used as that marketing tool, because this is the vision for Berthoud. This is what we're wanting to see come into a town. And when Walt goes to, he was in Las Vegas a couple weeks ago, when he goes
is it in the casino?
No, at the convention where, people like the Commercial Developers or Retail Developers Association, where they will come and talk to different communities, and they want to see, reinvestment. And this vision in this comprehensive plan, it's about reinvesting in Berthoud. It's about where do we want to go in the future. And companies are wanting to see that type of reinvestment and commitment in a community. I mean, some companies might not care, but the type of company that Berthoud wants to have in town wants to know that reinvestment is there. And that's the type of company that we want to have in Berthoud as well. Somebody who's wanting to reinvest, to do high quality development that helps protect the property values of those around them and be respectful of everybody else who's made a commitment to Berthoud. Yep. So it is a marketing tool. It can be used for a marketing tool.
Thank you for doing these workshops.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I could sit around and talk all night long about planning, and I know some of you want to do that too, which is great. But again, now you have 44 minutes left to hope that there's a pack of strawberries
You
left.
should go check it out.
Rhubarb. I gotta get some.
Yeah, rhubarb, yes.
What do you do with rhubarb?
Hi.
Lots of sugar.
Yeah,
Lots of sugar.
It's a vehicle for sugar.
That's yeah, or agave, that works too.
Okay.
Yes, so anyway, but take a look at the comprehensive plan, read through it, look at the action items, and we can always have more roundtables. I'll go back here now. Our next land use hearing is on the 22nd, and there's one item that evening. Town trustees on the 13th of June, so next Tuesday, we'll hear Caring Pathways. They do not have any work sessions, but I am gonna send you all the links to the Metro District work session and the work session on water and sewer. And other than that, then let's see, that will be, our next meeting is on the 22nd. We will not have a meeting on the 13th of July. And then next, so the 22nd of June and then the 27th of July. And we have something planned, a public hearing on the 27th and public hearing on the 22nd. I don't have any other workshops planned yet, but definitely we can keep doing them.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, it's fun working with you all when you are curious and you want to understand. So it's nice.
So, do any of the commissioners have any news they wanna share?
No, I was gonna share about the land use. I guess, well, there were two things, yeah, so Governor Polis did away with growth caps, not that we have one, but it was supposed to be kind of a sister piece of legislation to another piece that was not actually taken up by the Senate or not passed ultimately, and that was related to essentially also telling communities they didn't have as much control over things like accessory dwelling units and stuff like that.
That was really unpopular.
Very unpopular across all political
Yeah, I
spectrums
was reading
and
about it. It's
towns
terrible.
and geographies across the state.
It was the delivery.
Yeah.
Something like that.
It didn't go well. What's
Yeah.
interesting though is that it just actually passed, very similarly passed in Montana.
Really,
So just, yeah,
really
it-
interesting.
But yeah, so just those two things that kind of.
I think Boulder would sue. Just 'cause of Boulder.
They might, I think Boulder allows ADUs, I believe, but they probably,
You could find-
I think what it was is that Colorado has a strong heritage of local control. And just generally of not liking to be told what to do by a government that's larger than the next rung down. So any town or municipality did not like the state coming in and saying what they could do.
500 square foot is going for like 2.2 now, so.
But it was gonna be to the point, and I'm not saying it's good or bad, but essentially the way it was written is like a single family home that was surrounded by all single family homes could essentially just construct a shed in their backyard and call it an ADU and start collecting rent, and I think a lot of towns weren't comfortable with that, or at least not comfortable with not having a say in
But
it.
it seemed really loose too when I was reading that.
Yeah.
Like the guidelines are really loose. Maybe they would have put regs in to fill that in, but
I guess the intention was to be in response to, we have a housing crisis across the country, and we have a housing crisis on the Front Range, and so the intentions weren't necessarily wrong of like, we need more housing units, but the rollout, the delivery, and maybe the specific actions weren't, the best, so. Nothing else from you?
any other news anyone has? Other than it's time to go to the farmer's market.
So we nixed the open forum, we talked about whatever that was, right? But I see someone sitting in the audience all night and I'm just dying to know, is there anything we can
Gonna
answer
put her on
for
the spot.
them? Or maybe she works for the local newspaper, I don't know, but it's so nice to have you here.
Thanks. I'm a local realtor and I love to know what's going on in the town. That's why I come and I'll
Well, thank you for being
check
here.
in when I can. My husband is also, I think he's the commissioner of Port, and so I was gonna give you, he can probably tell you more about that, how they got that bike, how that decision went, came to fruition, or Chris, it sounds like you were on Port.
It was just, I wasn't on it for the full portion of that plan development, but I recall that like, there was a process and like, it was selective, like, this is what we want here, and there were some like high-level reasons why they wanted it there, so.
Our family's very excited about
Yeah,
it.
I hope it's the
And
busiest
I
one in the
know-
country, that would be great.
I know folks from Loveland that are waiting for that to open up, so
That sounds good.
just the, two
Like the
cents
farmers.
is, it hopefully is gonna be great.
It looks like they're doing a nice job.
We want to thank Lynn, you're back, so it's good to see you.
I try to come when I can. I know the people on Meadowlark aren't too happy or weren't too happy about
Yeah, there's some homes that, there's, it's, all development is typically in somebody's backyard.
That's right. All right, well, unless we have something else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, we don't need a second for that. We just all